asleep to asthma horror stories whispered in the dark. This one will feel like it crawls straight out of your headphones and onto the trailhead with you. You're listening to ASMR 404Found. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. So I guess I gotta put this somewhere, because keeping it in my head is worse than laying it out for strangers. And the only place that makes sense is here. Because if you've ever been out on those long American backcountry trails, you'll know the silence and the crunch of gravel under your boots and the way the air gets heavier. But you're a few miles from the lot, so here goes. I started this hike in northern Colorado, around the Roosevelt National Forest, and the trailhead was just like any other wooden sign, faded names, carved initials, scraps of duct tape stuck. Where folks had left notes, and the gravel lot had a few cars parked crooked like they always do. Because nobody lines up perfect out there, and the morning air had that mix of pine resin and dew that makes you want to breathe deeper, but at the same time, you know you're walking into something way bigger than Yowie. Kept thinking how normal it all felt at first, the way a regular Saturday should feel. I had my pack snug against my shoulders, the straps cutting that little ache into the skin. But that's part of the deal, right? The sun hadn't burned through the haze yet, and the light was soft yellow like butter spread to thin over toast, and the only sounds were distant birds, some jay squawking like it owned the place, a woodpecker hammering against some half-rotten trunk out of sight, and the gravel shifting under my boots. And maybe this is where I should say I've done this trail before, or at least I thought I had, because the name on the map was the same. And the first half mile was exactly as I remembered: switchbacks winding through scrub oak and sagebrush, a little creek trickling under a footbridge with rusted nails poking out of the rails. But then I noticed something that stuck with me. The signpost after that bridge wasn't the one I remembered. It had the same trail name carved into it, but the wood looked newer. The letters sharper, the edges almost glowing against the bark background, and when I tapped it with my knuckles, it sounded hollow, like there was a cavity inside and not solid. Barry shrugged it off, kept walking, because you don't bail that early when you drove 2 hours out from Denver and stocked one jerky and Gatorade and packed an emergency blanket just to feel like a responsible hiker. But the more I walked, the stranger the spacing felt between landmarks. The creek that should have crossed the trail again at mile 1 never appeared, and the ridge line that always peeked through the trees stayed hidden behind a wall of pine thicker than I'd ever seen. In that stretch in the silence, it changed too. The birds cut out like someone flipped a switch, the air heavier, the crunch of my boots too loud, and I started catching myself looking over my shoulder like I was being followed, even though there wasn't a damn sound except my breathing and the occasional snap of a twig that could have been a squirrel but didn't sound. Like when it sounded sharper, deliberate, kept pushing, because that's what you do. You say to yourself, it's fine, it's just a new reroute. Maybe the trail crews came through. Maybe a storm knocked out the old path, so they carved a fresh one in. Sure, that explains the new signpost too, and you convince yourself, because that's what keeps you moving forward. But when the smell hit me, it was harder to explain. It wasn't dead animal like you'd expect on a trail. It wasn't skunk or rot. It was sweet like syrup, like something had been cooking sugar too long on a stove top, and then left to burn until it clung to everything, and I swear it coated the inside of my throat. With every breath he pulled my bandana up over my mouth, but it didn't help much, and I was about ready to turn around when I heard something up ahead. It wasn't footsteps, not exactly, more like a dragging sound, like cloth or rope being pulled over dirt, steady and slow, and I froze right there, middle of the trail, heart thumping, and that's when the air got colder. I swear my breath fogged. Even though it was late summer and the sweat down my back turned icy in an instant, I tried to call out, like you would, hey, is somebody there, you need help? But the words came out soft, weaker than I meant, like my throat didn't want to push the sound. And that dragging noise stopped right when I spoke, and the silence that followed was worse than anything because it felt like the trees themselves were holding their breath, waiting. She stood there maybe 30 seconds, maybe 3 minutes. I don't know, time was jelly, and then from the corner of my eye, left side of the trail, something shifted between the pines. It wasn't a person, at least. Not shaped like one, tall to tall, the shoulders crooked like they'd been broken and set wrong, and the head tilted way too far to the side like a mannequin that got dropped. But the worst was the way the branches bent away from it, not snapped, just bent like they didn't want to touch it, like the trees themselves refused contact. It didn't move. I couldn't, my boots felt nailed down and my pulse was hammering in my ears. And then it leaned out more into the open, and I swear the sun dimmed. Right then, like clouds rolled in, but when I looked up there weren't any clouds, just pale sky. When I looked back down, the thing was gone. I wanted to believe I'd imagined it. Wanted to laugh it off, shake my head and keep hiking, but the trail ahead looked wrong. The dirt was darker, like it had been burned, and the sweet burnt sugar smell was stronger, and the silence was absolute. So I turned around. That's what anyone would do, right? Just turn back, head for the lot, maybe crack a beer at the tailgate and curse yourself for spooking over nothing. But the second I spun around, I knew the trail behind me wasn't the same anymore. The switchbacks were gone, the footbridge gone, creek gone. It was just a straight, narrow path, cutting deeper between trees that leaned too close like they wanted to swallow it whole. And the ground was damp under my boots like I was stepping in mud. Though it hadn't rained in weeks, me throat tightened, panic clawing up, but I kept walking. Because what else do? You keep moving because stopping feels like death. I swear the dragging sound started again behind me, slow, steady, scraping closer every time. I tried to breathe quieter. It matched me. When I paused, it paused. When quickened my steps, it quickened tune. Then I realized something worse. I wasn't breathing alone. I could hear another breath sensing with mine, just a half beat late like an echo, but wetter, heavier, and closer than it should have been. So I'm standing there on that narrow, darkened stretch of trail, but the pines pressing in on both sides and every hair on my body standing up. Because that breathing behind me wasn't mine. I swear to God it wasn't mine, and my brain was running through every dumb explanation it could throw out. Some drifter messing with me, some hunter crouched low dragging gear through the dirt, some hiker in trouble, but nothing fit. Because the timing of that breath was wrong and the air carried it right to the back of my neck, warm and damp like something leaning over my shoulder. Even though when I spun around, nothing was there, nothing except the dirt path curving deeper and deeper into that thick pine that looked more like a tunnel than forced me. Legs wanted to bolt, but fear nailed me down again, so I told myself if I just kept steady, If I just kept a rhythm, maybe I'd make it back to the lot. Maybe I'd break through and see asphalt and pick up trucks and folks unloading coolers. But each step sank deeper into that mud-slick ground, and every few paces I felt the drag right behind me, like cloth or rope or something heavier scraping along, and I wanted to plug my ears. But that would have made it worse because the silence was a trap. The silence was thick like cotton shoved down my throat. Smell changed again. As I walked, it shifted from burnt sugar into something sweeter, sharper, like flowers rotting in a vase left on a porch in July, the kind of smell that makes you gag even though it's technically floral, and it clung in my mouth until I wanted to spit. But the spit just hung on my lip thicker than it should have been, like syrup. After maybe 10 minutes of that trail, the light changed to, I swear it did it, dimmed into this copper tint like the sun was bleeding through smoked glass. Even though there weren't any clouds, and the shadows of the trees stretched too long across the path so that every step I took landed in shadow, and not one of them felt like it was mine. The sound of my boots was mine, sure, but the feeling underfoot was wrong, softer, wetter, like stepping on carpet soaked through. I kept expecting my boots to sink, but they didn't, not all the way. They just pressed down and then released with this sucking sound that made my stomach clench, and then the whispers started. I'm not exaggerating, they weren't wind through branches, they were too sharp, too close. Little fragments of words curling around my ears like someone speaking right into the shell of them, and they weren't in English, not the way we talk. They had this rising and falling rhythm like chanting, but broken into pieces. And the worst part was I understood a word or two, not the whole phrase. Just little flashes like stay, like turn, like bleed me. Hands shook so bad I nearly dropped my pack straps, and when I glanced down at them, I froze because my nails were darker stained, like I dipped them in ink, and I swear to you they weren't. Like that when I started the hike, I kept rubbing them against my jeans, trying to scrape it off. But the more I rubbed, the darker they got, until it looked like the black was spreading under the nail bed, slow as oil seeping into woody. Pushed faster, then nearly jogging, but the trail didn't change. It just kept winding straight deeper and deeper, like I was on a treadmill carved out of dirt and trees, and I realized I hadn't seen a single landmark, not a rock outcropping, not a down log. Nothing, just endless trunks, and the dragging behind me louder, and the breathing thicker, wetter, until it felt like whatever it was had its mouth almost pressed to my ear. I swear on every mile of trail I've ever walked, I heard it say my name, and not loud, not clear, but enough that my blood iced, because I never said my name out there. I never spoke it out loud, and hearing it in that voice that wasn't a voice, more like air, forced through wet cloth, nearly dropped me to my knees. He broke then. I tore down that path, boots slamming, mud spraying, my pack bouncing, and every step I felt it behind me, matching me faster, heavier, the dragging now scraping like claws, scoring into the dirt, and I didn't care if I tripped. I just wanted out. I just wanted a sliver of normal sky in a parking lot, but the trees blurred past, and the air got colder with each stride until it was like running through a freezer, and then I hit the clearing. It opened up sudden like someone yanked a curtain. I nearly fell into it, a wide circle with grass pressed flat, like something had laid down in it again and again, and the center of it was wrong. The center wasn't grass. grass or dirt. It was water, black, still water, about 10 feet across, sunk into the earth like a well without a wall, and the smell pouring out of it was that same burnt sugar and flowers, and it made me gag so hard I bent double, dragging, stopped. Right at the edge of the clearing, I heard it pause like whatever it was didn't want to step into the circle, but the breathing it stayed, the breathing lean close and hot. I could feel pressure on my shoulder even though nothing touched me. My legs shook like they wanted to collapse into that water. Harry kept telling myself, don't look back, just focus on the other side of the clearing. But when I lifted my eyes, there was no other side. There was just more trees looping back around, but wrong shapes, twisted like they'd been melted and set crooked, the trunks bending away from the water like they feared it, and the shadows all pointed inward, not outward, and the whispers rose again, louder, sharper, curling like snakes through my ears. I swear they were saying, jump, jump, jump. He staggered back from the edge, but the grass was slick underfoot like oil, and I slipped to my knees, barely catching myself before I slid in. And when I looked into that water, my stomach dropped, because my reflection wasn't me. The face staring back was gone pale, eyes sunken, skin pulled tight over bone, and the mouth was open wide like it was screaming. But no sound came out, and I couldn't tear my eyes away. The reflection's mouth started moving, then not screaming, but forming words that sensed with the whispers around me, and even though I couldn't understand them fully, I knew they were calling me to come closer, to let go, to Valley. Don't know how long I knelt there, maybe seconds, maybe hours. But when I tore my eyes away, the dragging was back behind me, closer than ever, and the hot, wet breath filled my ear until I thought I'd drown in it. And the whisper of my name hit again, this time clear as day, and I realized I wasn't alone in the clearing anymore. So I was kneeling there in that flattened grass, my knees sinking into the slick earth, the smell of burnt sugar and rot curling into my nose, while that reflection in the water twisted its mouth wider and wider like it wanted to swallow me whole. I kept trying to pull my eyes away, but the whispers were digging deeper in my skull, and the dragging sound had crept right behind me, louder, sharper, until it stopped so close I swear I could feel whatever it was breathing straight through the strands of my hair, and I couldn't take it anymore. I spun around, and I wish I hadn't, because it was standing there in the clearing with me, not at the edge anymore, not hiding behind the pines, but full shape in the open, and my stomach went hollow. It wasn't shaped right. It was tall to tall, stretched like someone had grabbed the bones and pulled them past where they should go, and the skin, or what looked like skin, hung in folds, too long in some spots and too tight in others, and the shoulders crooked wrong like snap sticks, reset badly, and the head tilted so far to the side it almost touched the collar, and I thought for a second it was just bones wrapped in old canvas cloth, because the texture wasn't flesh, it was like parchment dried and stretched over a frame, and the eyes were pits, deep black pits, with a shine like wet stone catching the copper light, and that dragging I'd been hearing was its arms. Its arms were too long, dragging the tips of its fingers through the grass and dirt, and the nails or claws, or whatever they were, left trails in the ground, deep grooves like something heavy had been dragged for molesty. Froze, couldn't scream, couldn't breathe, because my chest was tight like ropes were bound around it, and the thing just tilted its head further until I heard this crack like timber splitting and its mouth opened slow to slow wide enough that I thought it had unhinged, and the smell pouring out of it was the same burnt sugar rot that coated the clearing, and I realized that was where it came from the whole time. Every step, every breath, it had been feeding the air with that stingy scramble back on my hands, trying not to slip into that water behind me, and it took a step forward, but the step wasn't like ours. It didn't lift a foot. It just slid like the ground let it glide, and the grass beneath it bent flat, like it was bowing to it, and every time it moved closer, the whispers grew louder until they were almost a chant, and I realized they weren't just in my head, they were coming from it, from the hollow of its open mouth, like a crowd of voices all jammed into one body. Me back hit the soft edge of the pool, and cold moisture soaked through my jeans, and I almost slid, and then my reflection's hands were pressed to the underside of the water, now palms slamming against the surface like it was trapped beneath glass. I couldn't decide which was worse, the thing standing over me or the thing in the water begging me without sound, and the voices filled me so much I felt my vision swimmy. Grabbed the nearest thing I could, a stick broken off at the edge of the clearing, more like a branch than a weapon, but I held it out anyway, my arm shaking like hell, and I yelled at it to stop, to stay back, and my voice cracked like a teenager's and echoed across the circle, but the thing did stop just for a second. It tilted its head back the other way with another crack, and then the mouth closed. It made a sound low like a hum that rattled the dirt under me like distant thunder. As where the pool water rippled with that branch in my hand snapped in two, like it couldn't bear the weight of that sound, and both pieces fell, useless, and the hum deepened until my teeth ached in my skull. I dropped to my elbows, clutching my ears, but it didn't help. It vibrated through bone and blood. My reflection in the pool stopped screaming and started smiling this wide, dead grin, and it pointed up at me with one hand before sinking slowly out of sight. He wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. I kept pushing on them like I was underwater until finally I forced myself sideways, crawling through the flattened grass, away from the pool, away from the creature that just stood and watched me with that tilt and that hum. I swear it let me crawl. I swear it could have ended it right then, but it stepped aside, like it was hurting me, like it wanted me to leave. But in the direction it chose, it broke past the circle of grass and back into the pines. And the trail looked different again, the trunks closer, the path narrower, the air so heavy it felt like breathing soup, and behind me that never stopped it, just followed softer but steady like a tuning fork pressed to my spine. I kept stumbling forward, tripping over roots that weren't there, before branches clawing at my arms though no wind blew. And every step I took, the hum sank deeper until it was part of me, until it felt like my heartbeat had sensed with after what felt like hours. I spotted another break in the trees, a small wooden signpost leaning crooked, barely visible under moss, and I rushed to it because a sign meant civilization. A sign meant I could reorient, but when I wiped the moss away, my chest froze. The letters carved into the wood weren't English, they weren't any language. I knew they spiraled inward like the strokes were carved to pull my eyes down to the center. And the longer I looked, the more the strokes seemed to shift like worms turning in the wood. And my vision blurred. He jerked my eyes away and realized the hum had grown louder right beside me. Though I hadn't heard a step, hadn't felt air shift, and I didn't want to look, but I did anyway, and there it was standing just past the sign. Its long fingers brushing the carved wood, and the spirals lit faint red like embers in a dying fire. And the hum rose until my knees buckled, and I swore I felt blood in my ears. He pressed my palms against my head and screamed louder than I've ever screamed, not in words, just raw sound. And when I opened my eyes, the thing wasn't there anymore. The hum cut off sharp, leaving me in silence, so thick it felt like I'd gone deaf, and the signpost was gone too. Like it had never been. He stumbled forward, half blind, half crazed, and the path opened again. But this time I saw something impossible. I saw lights up ahead, yellow-white flickering, like lanterns or headlights, and my chest surged with hope. I thought maybe the trail ended. Maybe I'd stumbled toward a campground or a ranger station, so I ran. I don't even remember touching the ground, just branches whipping my face, boots slamming, until I burst into another clearing, and that's when I realized the lights weren't lanterns. And they weren't headlights, they were eyes, dozens of them glowing faint through the tree line, staring out at me unblinking, and every single one tilted at the same broken angle as the thing that had followed me. So I stood there frozen in that clearing, chest heaving, legs trembling, eyes locked on that tree line. The yellow-white flickers pulsed and blinked, except they weren't blinks. They weren't lights at all, they were eyes. I could see them better. The longer I stared, dozens of them glowing faint like coals buried under ash, each one reflecting the copper-tinted sky, and each one tilted at that same broken angle as the thing that had followed me from the circle of water. And the longer I looked, the more pairs I could count, until it wasn't dozens anymore. It was hundreds, stretching up the trunks like the trees themselves were filled with sockets, filled with watchers leaning crooked in unison. He wanted to back away, but the ground wouldn't let me. My boots felt cemented into the soil, and the clearing itself had changed. It wasn't grass anymore, not really. It was softer, spongier. The more I shifted, the more I realized it was covered in something like moss or hair, thick, damp strands that clung to the soles of my boots, and the smell of it was worse than anything, yet a mix of that burnt sugar rot and something metallic like iron, like blood. It seeped through the air until I gagged and bent over trying to spit. But the spit that hit the ground was darker than it should have been, almost black. The eyes didn't move. They didn't blink, they just stared and stared, and I realized I could hear them all breathing in unison, a wet, staggered inhale, then a pause, then an exhale like bellows made of flesh, and that rhythm sank into my chest until my own lungs wanted to follow it, and before I knew it, I was matching them breath for breath. Like I didn't have a choice, I forced myself to look away, tried to focus on anything else, but the clearing stretched too wide to run across, and the trees formed a wall of shadows punctured by those eyes. And there was no trail, no exit, no way back. And panic clawed so hard at me I dropped to my knees, clutching at the moss-hair ground just to steady myself. And when I touched it, I wished I hadn't, because it moved, it squirmed against my palms, writhing like worms, twisting into my skin. I yanked my hands back, but the sensation didn't stop. It felt like they were still crawling under the skin of my palms, burrowing deeper. I tore at my hands, scraped them against my jeans until fabric ripped and skin burned. But the feeling only spread, crawling up my arms into my chest, and I swear I felt pulsing inside me, something not mine sensing with that collective breath. When I looked down, my veins were darker, bulging like they'd been inked with tar. And my heartbeat was no longer my own, it was their thudding, heavy, slow like drums. In the earth, that's when the eyes moved, not all at once, but one by one. The closest pair stepped forward out of the shadows, and it wasn't the same figure from before. It was smaller, hunched like a child, but stretched thin in all the wrong places. Its arms dangling, low fingers dragging furrows through the ground. Its head tilted at that crooked break, eyes shining with that faint lantern glow. His mouth was wide open, but no sound came out, only more of that burnt sugar stench spilling in waves until my stomach lurchetted, shuffled closer, dragging itself across the moss-hair ground. And then another pair of eyes stepped forward, and another, until the clearing was filling with them, figures of all shapes and sizes, but all broken, tilted, stretched wrong, their mouths hanging, their arms dragging some missing parts. Some too many parts, and they all moved in silence except for the unison breath that grew louder with each step until it roared in my ears. He stumbled backward, my boots sinking ankle deep in that writhing ground, and I wanted to scream. But the breath caught in my throat like it didn't belong to me anymore. One of them reached out, long fingers brushing the edge of my jacket, and the touch was ice cold, sharp enough that my skin burned under it, and when I tried to slap it away, my arm moved slow like I was underwater, and the fingers left black streaks across the fabric like soot that sank deeper and deeper until it vanished into the weave. He thought about running, but where could I go? The clearing had no exit, the trees sealed, and the eyes filled every space, and my legs wouldn't work right. They shook like rubber, but I forced them to move. I lunged sideways, tripping over the spongy ground and crashing onto my shoulder, but the pain didn't feel real. It was distant, muted, like a memory of pain, not the real thing, and I crawled on hands and knees, pushing through that hair, like moss strands wrapping my wrists, trying to pull me down, but I yanked free, and when I looked up I saw a gap, a break in the circle. Not an exit, not a trail, but a narrow corridor between two of the figures leaning apart, like a doorway just wide enough to crawl through. He didn't think I just went for it, scrambled to my feet, half running, half stumbling, right for that gap. And the figures nearest tilted their heads further, their jaws stretching impossibly wide as I passed between them, but they didn't grab me, they didn't stop me, they just watched, their glowing eyes following every jerking movement of my body. And the breath rose to a pitch so high I thought my eardrums would burst. But still I shoved through the gap and found myself on another path. This one was narrower than any trail I'd seen, yet barely wide enough for one person. The trees pressing close, their bark slick with something wet that smeared against my sleeves, and the air thicker than tar, each inhale choking me, but I pushed on because I couldn't stay in that clearing, couldn't let those eyes swallow. Meth hum was back, then soft at first, rising from behind me, the same hum from the tall figure in the circle of water. I knew it had never left, it had only been waiting, and as I stumbled deeper into that corridor of trees, I realized the hum wasn't behind me anymore. It was all around me, vibrating from the trunks, from the ground, from inside my own chest, until my teeth rattled. He broke into another small clearing, then not wide, not open, just enough space for one massive shape in the center, and at first I thought it was a tree. But then I saw the bark pull pulsing, saw the branches twitching like limbs. The shape began to turn slowly toward me, and I realized it wasn't a tree at all. It was another figure much larger than the rest, so large it brushed the canopy. When it finally faced me, its eyes weren't faint, they were blazing bright white, flooding the space with a glow that erased every shadow except the one under me, and in that glow I saw my own body stretched and broken in the same way. Arms dragging, head tilted, eyes glowing crooked back at me. So I'm standing there staring up at this towering figure that isn't a tree at all, its shape quivering against the copper sky, its branches twitching like bone arms, his eyes pouring out white light so blinding that every detail of the clearing around me was erased except for the black outline of my own body stretched crooked in its glow. And the longer I stared, the more I realized that broken reflection wasn't just some trick, it was me. It was my stance, my posture, but ruined my head. Tilted my arms too long, dragging my nails, raking the ground. Even though when I looked down, my real arms were just my arms trembling, and clutched against my chest. Giant lowered its face toward me, the cracking sound of wood splitting ringing with each bend, and I felt the heat of its gaze pressing into my skin like a furnace, even though the air was freezing and the light filled my vision, until I couldn't close my eyes against it because the lids wouldn't move anymore. They were pinned open, and in the glow I could see more detail in the ground. The moss hair stuff curling tighter, trying to wrap around my boots, and climbing higher toward my knees like it wanted to root me where I stood, and I shook my legs hard trying to kick free, but the strands tightened like cords. Some rose again, then deep and steady from the giant's chest, and I could feel it thrumming in my own rib cage, sensing with my pulse until my heart was pounding in time with it, and I wanted to scream. But my jaw refused to open, so the sound was stuck inside me, just vibrating against my teeth, while the towering figure bent lower still until its eyes were level with mine. I saw my reflection clearer than ever, stretched skin, sunk eyes, and the grin carved across my face. Though I wasn't grinning, I wasn't smiling. I was suffocating. Then the light dimmed, not out, but inward, like it was being pulled through me and into my chest, and I felt my veins seize, black lines crawling up my neck and down my arms faster this time, burning cold as ice water, until my fingers curled without me commanding them, nails digging into my palms. When I tore my eyes from the giant, I saw the trees around the clearing leaning closer, all there, dark faces splitting to reveal more eyes, dozens, hundreds staring. Every single one reflected me in that broken shape, just me over and over again, multiplied, until I didn't know if I was even me anymore. I forced my jaw open, finally tearing loose a sound raw and ugly, and the moss hair strand shivered and loosened just enough for me to rip one leg free, then the other stumbling forward, right at the giant, because there was nowhere else to go, nowhere left but through it. And as I ran, its arms unfolded impossibly long, the fingers dragging deep trenches in the dirt. The hum cracked into something else, a voice made of every whisper I'd heard since I set foot on this trail, layered into one, and it spoke clear this time. It said your Ursi crashed into its legs, but instead of hitting bark or flesh, went straight through like stepping into water, except colder and thicker. And when I looked down, wasn't standing on ground anymore. I was sinking slow into a black depth that smelled of rot and sugar and flowers all at once, and the light of its eyes was gone, replaced by nothing but dark water stretching forever in every direction, and my own breath echoing to loud panic clawed through me, and I thrashed, but the water didn't move, no ripples, no splash, it just held me suspended. I could feel hands brushing against me, not pushing, not pulling, just touching, dozens of them, gliding across my arms, my face, my throat, and every touch left a burning brand, like ink seeping beneath the skin, and the whispers were clearer here, right against my ear, inside my skull, whispering faster. Then I could understand, one after another, layering until it was a scream that never peaked, just endless urging. He opened. I mouthed to yell, and water filled it, thick sweet water that tasted like burnt syrup, sliding down my throat, choking me, and yet I was breathing, I was inhaling it like air. And the more I breathed, the less my chest ached, until it was natural, and my body stopped fighting, and the weightlessness turned almost calm, almost warm. That's when I saw them all, the faces floating around me, pale, twisted, broken, but familiar, each one a hiker, each one with packs and boots and jackets, some shredded, some soaked, but all with that same crooked tilt to their heads, and every single one smiling wide to wide. And when they smiled, I felt my own lips twitching, stretching against my will, until I mirrored them, teeth bared in the black water, and I knew without knowing that these were the ones who never left the trailhead, the ones who vanished and were never found. And they weren't gone, they were here waiting, breathing this thick water. And now I was with them, giant shape above bent, lower, its blazing eyes cutting through the water and landing on me, and the others scattered away, clearing space like they were making room. Its voice rolled through the dark, "You are becoming." I felt my limbs lengthening, joints popping like they were pulled by strings, my arms dragging down, heavier fingers scraping across nothing. And the tilt came, then my head jerking to the side, so sharp I thought the vertebrae snapped. But no pain, just a click, a reset, like my body was fitting into a moldy. Wanted to fight it, but my reflection in the dark water was no longer me. It was the broken shape, the same stretched grin, the same dragging arms. When I tried to close my mouth, the grin held fast. When I tried to straighten my neck, it tilted further, and the whispers surged. "You are ours, you are ours." Then suddenly a crack of light split the dark water above, like the surface breaking open. I saw the forest again, the trail, the copper sky, and I was rising fast, pulled upward by unseen hands through the water, bursting back into air on my knees in another clearing, gasping. Even though I'd been breathing all along, and my pack was gone, my water bottle gone, everything stripped, and the hum still shaking my chest, but the forest around me was wrong again. The trees bent, low branches nearly scraping the dirt, their bark carved with spirals glowing faint red, and the trail behind me was sealed shut. No way back, and in front of me a single path stretched forward, line with those crooked figures hunched silent, their eyes glowing faint like lanterns, guiding me deeper and deeper. And I knew without knowing this was the only way left. So I stood there on my knees, my chest rattling with that hum that wouldn't leave my ribs. No matter how hard I tried to breathe past it, the trail stretching ahead, lying on both sides. But those hunched crooked shapes, their eyes faint like lanterns in fog, and every one of them turned toward me, waiting, not moving, not reaching, just waiting. And the dirt beneath me was softer than dirt should be, almost spongy, like the ground itself wanted to pull me lower, and I pushed up onto shaky legs because what else could I do? There was no way back, no trail behind me, just a wall of trunks bent inward. And the whisper in my skull said forward, and I obeyed. Each step was heavy, like my boots were filled with wet sand, and every time I lifted a foot I felt that moss-hair ground clutching at my soul's threads, trying to drag me down. I kept shaking them loose like shaking off leeches, but they clung and spread higher every step, crawling up my ankles, wrapping my calves, and I had to claw at them to keep moving, but still I walked between those figures that lined the path. And the closer I passed, the clearer I saw them, each one different shapes, sizes, but all broken, stretched heads, tilted eyes, glowing mouths, slack open but silent, and I realized I knew some of their gear. I saw a bright orange beanie with the Colorado State flag patch. I saw a dented aluminum bottle. I saw hiking boots caked with dried mud. I realized these weren't just things, they were hikers who'd walked here before and never left me. Stomach churn as I pushed past, and each one tilted their head further as I passed, like they were sending me, like they were measuring if I belonged yet. And I kept muttering no, no, no under my breath, but my voice sounded strange, slurred deeper, like it wasn't my own throat anymore, and I bit down hard on my tongue, just to prove I still could, and the taste of blood filled my mouth, sharp, metallic. But it didn't feel right either. It was sweeter, like syrup, and thicker, sliding down the back of my throat. Without my swallowed path kept narrowing, trees pressing closer, until their bark scraped my shoulders and I could feel heat radiating from them. Not normal heat, but a feverish burning that made the air shimmer, and when I looked close I saw the spirals carved deep, glowing faint red like embers. Each spiral pulsed with the same rhythm as the hum in my chest. I realized I was walking inside a living thing, that the trees weren't trees, but part of it, part of the body of whatever owned this place after what felt like forever. Path opened to another space, not wide, not grand, just a hollow chamber, like a heart beating under the forest, and in the middle stood a structure tall. Wooden beams lashed together with ropes of moss hair rising into an arch, and hanging from that arch were more hikers, their packs stripped, their limbs dangling, their heads tilted, broken, every face stretched in that same grin, and every one of their eyes glowing faint light like candles set inside skulls, and I nearly collapsed at the sight, because I recognized one of them, a man whose missing poster I'd seen at the ranger station 3 years back. Same beard, same tattoo on his forearm, and there he was swaying gently, mouth frozen, and that awful smell of the figures lining the path stopped at the edge of the hollow, none stepping closer, like the arch was sacred. And they left me alone in the center with the hanging body swaying, and the hum grew louder, so loud my vision vibrated, and the arch itself seemed to breathe, the beams flexing like ribs, inhaling and exhaling. And in that breath came words not from mouths, but from the wood itself, low, deep, rattling words that said, "You walked. You stayed your earth." He clutched my head, shouting back, "No, no, I don't belong here. I don't want this." But my own voice broke halfway, my throat shredding into a hum that matched theirs. And when I slapped my hand over my mouth, I felt the tilt in my neck worsen, muscles locking, bones shifting, until my head hung at the same broken angle. And no matter how I forced it, it wouldn't straighten, and panic flared sharp An ugly arch bent lower than ropes creaking, beams groaning in one. The hanging body turned its head toward me even though its neck was snapped, and it smiled wider. And it whispered join, and the rest joined in join, a chorus of dead mouths whispering. I stumbled backward, shaking my head, but the ground surged, soft strands coiling around my ankles, yanking me forward, dragging me to the base of the arch, and my fingers clawed at dirt, ripped out clumps of hair, moss, soil. But it didn't matter, it pulled me closer until I was beneath them, looking up at the grinning faces, dripping black saliva onto my cheeks. Dark's glow intensified, pulsing red, searing, and the hum rose until my ears bled. Hot trickles down my neck and my chest locked tight, my heart pounding against the rhythm until it slowed, then stopped, sensing perfectly with theirs. And I thought this was it, that I was gone, that I was part of the hanging display. But then the ropes shuddered one by one, snapping like wet cords, and the bodies fell collapsing around me in a ring, their eyes still glowing, their mouths still grinning, and they crawled on broken limbs, dragging themselves toward me, whispering join, join, join. He tried to run, but the moss hair ground locked me, and the crawling bodies reached me, fingers clutching my arms, my legs pulling me down, faces pressed against my skin, cold wet mouths opening against my shoulders, whispering join, join. And every time they spoke, I felt another piece of me slip a little more, my grin wider, my louder, my head tilting further until I was one of them already, except for the last sliver of my mind. Screaming known, and that scream I saw it again at the edge of the hollow, the tall one, the first one, the stretched parchment figure with the crooked shoulders and the mouth that had fed me the stench. And it stood watching, silent, not joining the crawl, just waiting. I understood suddenly that all of them, the eyes, the bodies, the whispers, they weren't the true thing. They were pieces, fragments. It was the whole, it was the one, and it had chosen meth-crawling bodies, piled higher, their hands pinning me to the ground, their eyes blazing into mine. And the tall one raised its arm, slowly pointing one long finger at me, and the hum dropped low like thunder, rolling under the earth, and every voice said, "You will." So I lay there pinned under their weight, my arms locked by cold fingers, my legs wrapped in their limbs, every face pressed close, mouths grinning, eyes burning, and the chorus never stopping, "You will, you will, you will," until my ears rang and my chest felt like it was splitting in two. And all the while the tall one stood unmoving at the edge of the hollow, its long finger extended, its shoulders broken angles, its head tilted, like it was studying me, deciding if I was ready to belong. And the pressure in my skull grew so sharp I thought it might split bone. I tried to kick and thrash, but the crawling bodies didn't budge. They didn't even seem heavy, yet they held me like iron bands, every limb snapping tighter each time I moved, and the ground beneath me pulsed with their hum like I was lying on the chest of some giant beast. And it was breathing through me, filling me with its rhythm until my own breath locked in time. I hated it, hated the way my body obeyed, but my lungs betrayed me, sucking in that thick air, that syrup sweetness, that stank of rot. And Sugar, the tall one, began to move, then one long dragging step, then another. And every tree in the hollow bent away from it, branches groaning like they were afraid to touch, and the glow from its pits of eyes spread across the clearing, burning into the skin of the crawling ones, until they hissed and withdrew, leaving me alone in the dirt. I thought maybe I could roll up, scramble away, wrists, ankles, waist tightening, pulling me flat. I realized the ground itself was its rope. It didn't need hands to hold, might bend. Lower its arms unfolding, dragging through the soil, leaving deep grooves, and the mouth open wide, wider than human, wider than anything should open. Inside there weren't teeth, there weren't gums, there was only more dark, a pit that went on forever, and the sound that poured out wasn't the hum anymore, it was a voice, deeper than caves, rumbling through marrow. It said, "You will walk." You shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. No, no, I'm done, I'm not walking anymore. But the words rose louder, splitting through bone, and every vein in my body throbbed black against my skin until the pain made me writhe, and I realized it wasn't asking. It was telling, it was commanding, and my legs twitched not from me, not from my will. They twitched like puppet strings pulled tight. He screamed until my throat shredded, and the voice stopped just long enough for silence to crush me, and then it leaned even closer. Its breath hot, rancid, a mix of flowers rotted and sugar burnt thick in my nose. It whispered again, "Walk," and my legs bent up against the moss hair grip, snapping free as if the ground obeyed it, not me, and I stumbled to my feet, shaking, trying to fall. But each time I collapsed, the strands jerked me upright, and the tall one tilted its head. Further crackling bone sounds like laddered path behind it opened. Then the trees groaning as they bent away, revealing another narrow trail winding into darker woods. No sky above, only branches interlocked, and the tall one stepped aside, leaving the way open, its fingers still pointing, and I knew there was no choice, no escape, that the only thing left was forward. So I walked one step, then another, dragging my boots through the dirt, and every figure from the hollow, every crawling body, every hunched watcher slid back into the shadows, clearing space, but still watching, still grinning as I passed, their whispers threading through my ears like needles. You will walk the trail, twisted downward steep, and slick, the air hotter now, stifling like the breath of a furnace, and my vision swam with shadows. Shapes moving just out of sight, faces flashing in the bark of trees, mouths opening to laugh. When I blinked but gone, when I stared, and the deeper I went the more. The ground changed, soft dirt to stone, jagged, sharp, slicing my boots until my feet bled and left streaks behind, glowing faint red like the spirals carved into the trunks. The smell of iron was stronger now, overpowering even the sugar rot. Finally, the trail opened again into a cavernous space, a hollow beneath the forest, where roots dangled from the ceiling like ropes, and in the center a pit far wider than the pool I'd seen earlier, a pit so black it made the water look like glass. From that pit came a sound, 1,000 breaths drawn together in one long inhale, like the earth itself was sucking in air, and the roots around it quivered, like they were being pulled down. The tall one appeared behind me. I never heard it come, its shadow stretching over mine, its fingers resting just above my shoulder. Not touching, but heavy enough I wanted to collapse, and the voice filled me again. You will feed. And the roots shifted, pulling back like curtains, revealing bodies wedged in the soil. All along the cavern walls, hundreds, maybe thousands, pressed tight. Their eyes glowing, their heads tilted, every mouth grinning wide, and they began to chant not words, but sound, one long rising tone that built and built until the walls shook me. Legs carried me closer to the pit. No matter how I clawed at the ground, no matter how I begged my own body, it wouldn't listen. And when I reached the edge, I looked down into that void and saw movement below, not water, not shadow, but something alive, shifting, rolling like muscle under skin, and as it moved the air pulled, stronger, yanking at my hair, at my back straps, until I was nearly lifted off the ground. Tall one stepped beside me, towering, its glow burning my skin raw, and it leaned down, mouth opening, until that endless pit of dark hung inches from my head. And the voice poured again, "You will feed," and the ground beneath me cracked, splitting into spirals. Crawled out from my boots like veins, lighting the cavern blood red. And the chanting rose louder until I thought my skull would explode. And as I leaned over the pit, I saw faces rise from below, faces twisted, broken, stretched wide. And they weren't strangers, not this time. They were mine, my family, my friends, every person I'd ever known. Eyes glowing, mouths grinning, heads tilted, and their voices joined the chant, calling me by name, calling me down. So I stood there, toes at the edge of the pit, my breath gone stolen by the sucking pull rising out of the dark, faces shifting in the swirl of living muscle. Beneath me, eyes glowing, mouths stretched in grins, all of them calling my name, the voices layering over each other until it was unbearable, until I couldn't even remember if I had spoken my name first or if they had given it to me. And the tall one towered at my side, its finger resting on my shoulder, not heavy, not flesh, but weight that pinned my entire body, a command pressed straight into my marrow. And it whispered again, "Feed me." Legs buckled. I collapsed to my knees at the rim, peering down into that swirling black. The shapes below reached up, not arms, not hands, just tendrils of faces, mouths, eyes stitched together, pulling and stretching as if the pit itself was hungry. And my fingers dug into the ground, trying to hold myself back, but the dirt gave way, soft, hair-like strands curling around my nails, prying them free inch by inch until my grip was gone. I was sliding closer, my chest pressed to the lip, my face dangling over the pull. And the stench rose hot and sweet and rotten until I gagged. But no sound came because the chant swallowed every thought. He wanted to scream for help, but who would hear me down here in this hollow, where even the earth was alive and every voice belonged to it? Already my family, faces shifting below, mouths calling my name, my mother's eyes burning white, my father's jaw stretched, broken, grinning, my sister's head tilted sharp, her mouth locked in a smile. And my legs trembled harder because they weren't just illusions, they were mine. They were carved out of my memory and worn like masks by this thing, and it knew me, it knew every piece of meth. Tall one bent lower, its mouth opening wide. That endless pit inside lining up with the pit below like they were one. And the sound that rolled out wasn't words this time, it was a roar, a deep drawn inhale that pulled the cavern tighter, pulled my body down, and I felt my spine bending backward. From the pressure, my ribs creaking like kindling, snapping, my own chest trying to break open. And my voice finally tore out, raw, shredded a single word. The cavern walls shook at the sound, and the chant faltered for a breath. For one impossible second, silence hung heavy, and the faces below froze, staring up, mouths still grinning but quiet. In that gap I shoved backward, my nails ripping my palms open as I clawed against the moss-hair ground, dragging myself inches away from the edge. But the tall one's finger pressed heavier, burning my shoulder like coal. And the chant snapped back stronger than before, louder than my scream, drowning Me again he tried to turn to it, tried to look into those blazing eyes and shout my defiance. But when my head lifted, the tilt locked harder, my neck twisted, until bone popped sharp pain, lightning down my spine, and my jaw unhinged wide without wider than it should have, until the corners split and warm wet streaks ran down my chin, and my own voice poured out humming not words but the same chant, the same rhythm. I realized I was joining, I was feeding already, and there was no stopping it. The ground surged under me, pushing me forward, sliding me into the pit inch by inch. My body stopped resisting, my legs rising to stand. Wanted to collapse, my arms stretching outward as if offering myself to the pull, and when I looked down again, the faces below mirrored me. My mother, my father, my sister, all with arms stretched wide, their mouths moving with mine, chanting my own name back at me. Felt my toes lose the edge, my body tipping forward, the heat blasting up from the pit, hot enough to peel skin, and I shut my eyes tight, but even behind the lids, I saw the glow of their faces calling, and my head tilted sharper until the bone cracked. My grin tore wider until I could taste blood pouring sweet down my throat, and the last breath I drew was thick syrupy air filling me like cement, until I was heavy, sinking, not falling, but sinking into the black pit. Swallowed me whole, the voices rising triumphant, the hum deep shaking the world, and the tall one's mouth sealing above me like a lid closing over a jar. I was gone, sliding down through muscle and root, through heat and pressure, until the dark became everything, and the whispers drilled straight into my skull. You are ours, you will. To eat you will walk, and in that dark I opened my eyes, or maybe I never had eyes. Maybe they were burned away and replaced, because what I saw wasn't the pit anymore. It was the forest again, the trail stretching out endless, the copper sky bleeding. Overhead, the crooked figures lining both sides, their heads tilted, their mouths wide. My body moved forward step by step, heavy and unnatural, and I realized I was walking again. I was back where I began, only different, only wrong. Me hands dragged against the dirt, nails carving grooves too deep. My head hung broken to the side, my mouth frozen in a grin, and in every tree I saw faces watching, in every root I felt the hum shaking, and with every step I heard their whispers, not behind, not ahead, but inside my own chest. We are you, you are us, you will walk, you will feed, and so I walked. So I sank down into that pit, pulled not by gravity, but by hunger, like every root, every tendon, every voice below reached up and wrapped around my ribs, dragging me through the black syrup heat. And the moment the darkness swallowed my head, it wasn't silence, it was thunderous, endless voices layered so thick I could not hear my own thoughts. I tried to fight, but my chest cracked open like wet bark. Something slid inside, filling me, stretching me until I wasn't myself anymore. Really black didn't suffocate, it fed me, it poured down my throat into my lungs until I breathed it back out thick and heavy and sweet. And when I opened my eyes again, I was standing, not falling, not sinking, standing on the same trail where I had started, though the light was wrong. Copper sky overhead, the trees warped and twisted, like they had been bent by hands too strong and too cruel. And I knew without knowing that I was different, that my body was no longer many arms dangled useless like strings. My neck bent sharp to the side, a grin locked wide on my face, so wide it tore the corners raw. But there was no pain, only that endless some vibrating through marrow, and the crooked figures stood all around me, heads tilted, mouths grinning, welcoming me with no words, only silence that felt heavier than any scream. And when they turned, I turned. When they walked, I walked, and I could not stop me. Boots dragged across the dirt, carving spirals. As I moved, the trees watching with eyes hidden in knots, the air thick with sugar rot until it coated my tongue, but it no longer made me gag. It tasted like breath, like sustenance, and I swallowed it down, hungry for more. And every step I took, I heard the trail whisper inside me, not in my ears, but behind my eyes. Walk feet, he passed the hollow again where the bodies had crawled before. But now they bowed low, pressing their faces into the soil, their spines cracking as they bent. I knew they were showing deference, not to the tall figure, not to the forest, but to me, because I was part of it now. I was one of them, another vessel, another voice for the chant, and their whispers brushed my skin like moth wings. Welcome, welcome, welcome me. The trail stretched ahead, endless, winding down into thicker woods, and my body did not hesitate. It carried forward step after step like clockwork. I realized the horror wasn't that I would die here. No, the horror was that I would never die at all, that the trail had me forever. And every breath I took, every twitch of my limbs, every hum in my throat would keep feeding it, keeping it alive. But then I heard something different, a new sound beneath the chant, faint at first, but growing closer, the crunch of footsteps, not mine, not theirs, soft, nervous, hesitant. And I felt the crooked figures around me stiffen their grins, sharpening their heads, snapping toward the noise. And deep in my chest, the hum rose, eager, urgent, hungry. And that's when I saw them, a new hiker at the edge of the clearing. Young, flashlight in hand, backpack bright and clean, stepping slow like they had only just arrived. And their eyes scanned the trees wide, but curious the way mine had once done. And before I could even try to warn them, my mouth opened, grinning wider, my throat pouring out the hum louder, the chant rising with the others. Welcome, welcome. Welcome me, the tall one shifted in the distance, its glow pulsing like it had been waiting. And the forest bent away, opening a new path for the hiker, and I felt my body lurch forward, hungry, trembling, ready to guide them, ready to deliver them to the pit. Because that was my purpose now, to walk, to feed, to welcome the next. The new hiker's flashlight beam shook in their trembling hand, cutting through the copper air like a thin blade, but never reaching far, because the forest swallowed the light whole. The sound of their steps crunched nervous against the dirt, and each crackle sent tremors through my chest, where the hum lived, beating like a second heart, begging me to move forward, begging me to lead them down. And I could not fight it. I had no fight left. The crooked figures shifted around me, gliding more, then walking, their heads tilted further, their mouths stretched until their jaws creaked. And the chant rolled out, soft at first, but building. Welcome, welcome, welcome. The hiker froze, their light darting side to side, catching glimpses of warped trunks and hollow eyes, but never landing on us, never on me, because the trail does not show you, but you are not ready to see it. Waits until you take the step yourself. Tall one rose from the roots at the far edge, its body bending backward like a tree struck by lightning, its glow spilling across the clearing. And the air grew thicker, hotter, sweeter, until even from here I could taste its syrup on my tongue. I saw the hiker cough, gag, shake their head like the smell was suffocating, but still they lifted their boot and took another step forward. Because that is how it works. The trail called muscles and the body obesely moved without command. My legs dragging in rhythm with the others circling wide to box the hiker in, though they could not see us not yet, and my grin split further, my jaw hanging loose as the chant poured stronger from me, until it drowned out the sound of my own thoughts, and the hiker's light flickered in panic as they spun in place, whispering hello, is anyone there? And my throat answered yes, but not in words, in hum and rhythm, an endless invitation. Welcome me, the tall one pointed, and the ground split open, roots pulling back, revealing the path downward. The same spiraling descent I had walked, and the hiker stumbled toward it, eyes wide, terrified, but compelled, their steps shaky but sure, and their crooked figures parted to clear the way, each bowing their heads low as the chosen moved. I felt my chest rumble with hunger that was not mine, but ours, all of us, waiting for the moment when the pit would open again. There screamed as the cavern yawned wide below the trail, vomiting heat, and the hiker fell to their knees at the edge, flashlight clattering away, rolling into the dark, their hands gripping the dirt, desperate, pulling back, but the moss hair strands were already alive, twining around their wrists, burrowing under nails, and they screamed a raw sound that split against the chant, but the chant only grew louder, swelling, triumphant. The tall one leaned closer, its finger hovering above their back, and when it pressed down, the hiker's body arched sharp, their mouth tearing open in a silent wail. And then the pit pulled hard, a single inhale that swallowed every sound in the world, and the hiker was gone, dragged screaming into the black syrup heat. Cavern shook, the faces rose from the pit, grinning wider, chanting stronger, their voices layering until the forest above groaned and split, and when the echo died, the trail was quiet, again empty, again ready for the next. I stood there swaying, my head tilted, my grin frozen, my eyes burning. In my chest, the humbird sat his feet. The tall one turned to me, its mouth stretching open until the black inside met the night sky. It spoke not to my ears, but to the marrow of my bones. Again walk, feed, guide. My legs obeyed, stepping forward into the trees, the crooked figures moving with me, each of us spreading out along the trail, waiting, always waiting for the next footstep, the next voice, the next life to be pulled into the endless spiraling. I knew then with no doubt that the trail never ends, it only feeds, it only grows. I would walk it forever, grinning, humming, watching the forest bend, waiting at the trailhead for the next to arrive, and so the trail waits.